I'm making a new star key, but not just any star key. This star key is going to be a locket. A friend gave me this button. It's a vintage button, very old, and asked me to make it incorporate it into a star key. I get all these brass cutoffs from a friend at a recycling plant. He saves me the brass cutoffs that he gets from machine shops, I guess. And here I jump right in and I'm just machining a pocket for that button to fit in. And I have my internal calipers and checking to see once I exactly hit the size. And now I know. And I need to take the back out to make sure that the button fits internally. And this button is very old and it's packed with paper. And there I'm using my ice pick or my awl to clear that paper out. And it was very tough. I actually stabbed myself in the process. And finally I'm able to get that out. I didn't want to deform the brass. I wanted to only deform what was going to become garbage. And it's a beautiful stamping. It's very thin, so I have to be careful with it. And I wanted it to fit snugly in there, and it does. And so now I know it's time to take it off. But since I have the piece positioned so close to the 3-jaw chuck, I can't really part it off. I can't get that close. So I go as deep as I can, and that little groove is for the keys later on when I solder the keys on. And I go as deep as I can with the parting tool, and then I just use a hacksaw. And of course, right when I got to the bottom of the cut, it shoots away, but I found it. And there it is. And just cleaning the cut off on the back with the sander, and I'm keeping it wet and cool because it gets very hot to the touch. And then there's my part. And now I need to make some hardware that goes on the locket itself. And this is going to be the little lever. I'm using a jeweler's saw. Good thing about jeweler's saws, you can literally make a right turn inside of a piece of brass that big. Silver solder melts at a much higher temperature than any of the solder that I've ever used before. I'm kind of new to silver solder. You just take a little bit of it, you put it right in your joint, and then you heat it up. And once the solder flows, you let it cool, and then your joint is basically done. You could always clean it up. Since that metal's so thin, I was heating up this chunk and letting the heat soak into it. And there you go. I have a little lever. Now I have to make a hinge. I'm not very good at working tiny. It's always been very difficult for me, but there's one of the challenges in this project. And again, I'm using silver solder for the first time these last couple of weeks. So now I'm making my hinge tubes. And yeah, I solder it. I hold it in position. I run the risk of the solder basically running into the whole thing, but I was trusting in my ability. So it flowed only on the one piece I needed. And now it's time to make the other parts. And because it's difficult to solder all these things together, I have the hinge pin holding both of them in line. And I'm sitting in that groove that I engraved. That little piece of brass is just holding on the hinge pin to keep the other two tubes in place. And I had a little silver solder leaked into the hinge pin, so I had to heat it up to pull it out. I was able to heat up the pin itself and get it red hot and pull it back out. With the silver solder, the heat is very controllable. Like you can kind of pinpoint what you want to get hot and what you don't. And you'll notice how I'm able to control the heat with these steel blocks. You notice I'm working on top of steel blocks. And oh, here I am, I'm just sanding the hinge pins that are sticking out. The hinge pin, there's only one. And now I'm cutting the keys with a very dull saw blade. Earlier in the day I cut a black screw with that saw blade and essentially ruined it. There you go. And so here I'm controlling the heat. I'm working on these two steel blocks. They're very heavy and they soak the heat right up. So you'll notice they're soaking the heat up under the hinge where I don't want to reactivate the solder and make those knock out of position. So by having the key cantilevered in space right between the opening between the two steel bricks, I'm able to control the heat right where I want it, right in that spot. And I do that for each one of the 3 keys. And those rusty pieces of steel are just kind of holding things in place for me while I'm working. And the silver solder is right near the joint there. Once it it's hot enough, it flows. It gets to about 1200 degrees before it flows. And again, I'm shielding my hinge with that piece of steel right there, so I don't activate the solder. Quenching the key, and then I take it over and clean it. I'm using a brass wire brush and a drill press, and it's the best way to get off the debris left over from the soldering paste. And so far I've seen this scene about 50 times, and each time my impulse is to blow away the dust. Of course I can't. And there's my name. And I put the hinge pin in and I'm trying it. And now I was able to adjust the flare on the outside of the button so that it snaps in just right. And then kind of getting an audible click, which is what I wanted. And I'm making this for a friend, and when she saw it right away, she said, can we put a lanyard on it? And so I put a jump ring right there. And there it is, a leather jump ring, and my first attempt at a locket. I definitely am excited to make a new one after this. This was fun. Thank you.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our channel or send us a comment on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to check out our other project videos or visit us on MakeZine.com.